The awards and recognition, deserving and earned. The way that her name has been dragged through the mud when it comes to conservative media, press secretaries, and even the President of the United States, hard to reason with. In this episode, I sit down with Jemele Hill, who is open and honest as always when it comes to her upbringing, media, and how ESPN has changed, for better or for worse, and how SC6, which she co-hosted with Michael Smith, was full of potential until it was railroaded by one executive. I cannot wait for you guys to take all of this in, because it was truly a treat to sit down with someone that has been fantastic in this space and as a journalist. So here's my interview with Jemele Hill. Before we get started, if you can, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, give me a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and please do leave a review. It would be extremely helpful. Without further ado, here is Jemele Hill. Jemele Hill is someone that I have admired from afar. She is a fantastic journalist, and not only that, she is relentless on Twitter, so don't try to go at her. And we're going to call it Twitter because it's still called Twitter. Hello, Jemele Hill. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on. You have worked for the Raleigh News and Observer. You've worked for the Detroit Free Press. You are an Emmy Award-winning journalist. You are the co-founder of Lodge Freeway Media. You're a contributing writer at The Atlantic. Stop me if it's getting boring at this point. You're a former national columnist for ESPN. You hosted SC6 with Michael Smith. You're an award-winning podcaster for Jemele Hill's Unbothered, NABJ Journalist of the Year award winner, co-hosted on Vice. Carrie and Jemele Won't Stick to Sports. You have done a lot. When you got into this industry, did you have a vision that you would accomplish this much?
No, not at all. When I got into the business, when I was first starting as a cub journalist, my goal was just to make $50,000 a year. And if I were lucky enough to work for Sports Illustrated, that was what was number one on the vision board. It wasn't working at ESPN. Because I didn't want to do television. That wasn't what I felt like my mission was. I felt like my mission was to be a writer. And for those of us of a certain generation, Sports Illustrated was the preeminent place for sports writers to be. And I wanted to go there and write long form stories and big profiles and that sort of thing. And that never actually, materialized. They did offer me a job once when I was in my 20s, but it just wasn't the right job and I turned them down. But no, none of these things I really saw as being part of my, journalistic, kind of resume. If anything, I would say in particular, the last 10 years in my career, everything has been in the mode of like, oh, so that's happening now. Oh, okay, so I'm doing that. Like even when I got to ESPN, I wasn't thinking about being on television. I certainly wasn't thinking about hosting the 6 o'clock Sports Center. That's what real anchors do. And I did not consider myself a real anchor. So much of this is a surprise, and so much of this has frankly been about me being able to pivot in key moments. And so yeah, I think I'm just as surprised as anyone by the things I've been able to do.
But because you said that you weren't really wanting to be on television, and this is not me sucking up in any way, but you made the transition seem rather seamless. And the way that you presented yourself on television with Michael Smith and also on a bevy of other shows was TV friendly, and to the sports fan and the sports consumer, very friendly. So even though you didn't want to get into it, how did you, if you had a mental hurdle, get over it? And how did you make that transition, as I said, seem so seamless?
You probably, I've heard the phrase about ignorance being bliss, and it's a negative connotation with that. In my case, it was a positive one because I didn't know anything about TV. From the moment I ever did television at ESPN, I was only myself. I wasn't trying to imitate anybody. I wasn't nervous because I didn't take it that seriously because I never imagined it as something that I would ever do full time. So because I had that attitude, I was able to go in being myself, be self-deprecating and also, you know, keep it real when it came to my sports perspective, opinions, relying on the things I learned and been able to see and observe and cover as a journalist. So my superpower was that I was too stupid to know that I was supposed to behave differently on television. So that's the secret sauce.
But then it was fantastic theater for all of us that were consuming it. I'm going to get to SC6 in a moment. You touched on Sports Illustrated. This is part of a larger conversation about mass media that we're currently in. But that's what I wanted to do too. Like I read the back page. Like that was the first page that I went to every time I opened up Sports Illustrated. So what do you make of SI's, I mean, I hate to say it, but decay at this point from what it once was, the arena stuff that's going on, AI users, etc.
It's very disturbing and disheartening as a journalist. And granted, I still know good writers that write there.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, I think it's hard to imagine it being a shell of itself, but that's what it is. It's like Sports Illustrated used to really set the tone, particularly when it came to in-depth sports coverage, when it came to, profiles and issues and that sort of thing. And not that they got everything right, but that was a place where you knew you were going to spend some time with the story and getting to learn about something. And they wrote about, all sorts of complications in sports and the gray matter is what mattered to them. And to see how Sports Illustrated has just been reduced to what it is very disheartening. And when everybody learned that they were using AI, um, I'm sure I don't mean to sound like old woman yelling at a cloud, but if there's one thing about this sort of age that we're in of artificial intelligence, the idea that just anybody can do our jobs and anybody can be a journalist is it's really it's really kind of insulting on some level. And I think I'd make a very big demarcation line between what I'm talking about with artificial intelligence versus what I'm talking about with, say, citizen journalism, which I
Mm-hmm.
think citizen journalism is actually a really good thing. And that's mostly because I think it holds other journalists accountable. But it makes us like the watchdogs sometimes need watchdogs. And when you see that we've had many instances of citizen journalists, particularly when it came to video, like really shedding a light on things, it forces the media to understand where they're missing things when it comes to coverage. And so the difference with artificial intelligence is like there's a massive critical thinking piece and component of journalism. And I get it. Artificial intelligence is supposedly it is cloning and mimicking the intelligence of human beings. That is literally what it's designed to do. But there's a human piece to this profession that often gets lost, especially because journalists, the media, just putting that under that umbrella, are not well regarded. I mean, we haven't been well regarded for some time.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we've earned for sure. We've earned this lack of trust that people have in us, especially because we've just had too many moments where we have not stood up for the right things. We haven't used um, journalism in the way that it was supposed to be used. The entire profession can be boiled down to a simple phrase that most of us journalists, again, of a certain age, heard in journalism school or as we begin to make our way in this profession is that, you know, journalists are supposed to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. That's what they do. We are supposed to be the watchdogs. We're supposed to be the one holding the powers that be accountable. We are supposed to be the ones bringing the light to the darkness, bringing the awareness, asking the questions, asking the right question, the tough question, and the fair question all at once. And thinking about what Sports Illustrated used to represent as being like a real foundation in our wide institution of sports journalism, and to see it being kind of reduced to what it is. Had you told anybody, I guess I have to say 30 years ago, that
Hmm.
Sports Illustrated would be this, no one would have believed you.
No, absolutely not. To piggyback off of what you were just saying, what I have seen even most recently when it comes to the current administration and how they are even treating the press room, it seems like anybody can just wave the magic wand and call themselves a journalist at this point. But as you see it, because those that are novices to the media industry, they may not even understand it. And you are, and I mean this sincerely, an old school get in the dirt journalist. So, in your eyes, considering what you've seen now, if you were to explain this to somebody that is just taking in mass media as a 20-year-old and thinks that, as Jeff Pearlman has said, and he's talked about you eloquently, that Pat McAfee is the bar now when he teaches journalism classes. He's talked about it on his TikTok. What is the difference, would you say, in your eyes?
I don't think Pat McAfee, and you know, I don't know that I've heard him. I don't know that I've ever heard him say this, but Pat McAfee, I think he'd be the first person to tell you he's not a journalist. Like he's an entertainer. That's what he does.
Mm-hmm.
And does his show sometimes perform a journalistic function? Why, yes, it does, because they're talking to people, they're getting information. But at the end of the day, you look at, say, Aaron Rodgers, who used to at one point make regular appearances on the show. I don't know if he still will be. He paid Aaron Rodgers to do that, to be on his show. So he's not a guest, he's an employee,
Right.
basically. That's the difference, is that
He's a
oh,
contributor.
he's a contributor, correct. That's the way to see him.
Yeah.
That's not a that's not how journalism works. And so what is kind of enlightening is that a lot of the younger people who want to get in the media, they actually believe they can be celebrities. They believe that they're supposed to make money in this. And this is a very big difference
Mm-hmm.
from when I was coming up through journalism school. Most of us knew we were signing up to be poor, poor in perpetuity,
Yes.
because journalism, and I think because you have successful stories like Pat McAfee or somebody like Stephen A. Smith, people who have been able to make any, or even me, but have been able to make really good money and become known and through this profession. I have never made. I hope to one day. I've never made as much as Stephen A. or Pat McAfee, but the point is people look at them and they think that is what that's what you should be striving for as a journalist. And the reality is like 80 to 90% of journalists are working class. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they're working class, maybe barely middle class. You look at your local newspapers, your local TV stations, it's like there is a certain connectivity that journalists are supposed to have toward the public good. And so when I came up, nobody was thinking that journalism was ever a profession that you were supposed to get rich doing. You were doing it because you believed in the public service of journalism. And now that's very different. Like I think to Jeff Pearlman's point, a good percentage of these young people, they want to be Stephen A. and they want to be Pat McAfee. And I think that the function of their jobs is very different. Like Stephen A. certainly was a journalist, covered the NBA, worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer. I mean, like the reason why he has the reputation he has as an NBA insider and somebody who can give you deep perspective on the NBA is because he put the work in. Now I think the function of his job is a little bit different. Like he's in the commentary critique aspect
Mm-hmm.
of this, and therefore his line blurs a lot with entertainment. And when I was on ESPN and doing his and hers, like me and Michael Smith, my TV partner, we used to joke, but we were serious on air all the time that we were former journalists. We used to joke about this, right? Because at that point, when I'm on his and hers, while I'm bringing journalistic sensibilities to the work and to my perspective and to how we approach topics and that sort of thing. My job was to entertain you for an hour. My job was not necessarily to be a functioning journalist, you know, and unfortunately, because these lines have been blurred, it has deeply impacted how things are covered and why people do have a hard time differentiating between opinion and fact and what is journalism and what is not. Everybody with a cell phone is not a journalist. everybody who has a microphone is not a journalist. Because there's a layer of accountability that is there for journalism. Like when I wrote a story, when I was on the beat and covering teams and leagues, I wrote something. If I write something about somebody I'm covering, I got to go to the locker room the next day. And if they don't like it, we're in a conversation. I have to answer to somebody,
Hmm.
for what I write. And then yeah, there's a certain amount that you answer to the public, but like the accountability factor is pretty much removed from a lot of things that we see in media. And again, there's a difference between media and journalism. And a lot of people out here are doing media, and there's nothing wrong with that. Not a lot of people out here are actually doing journalism.
On that note, when we talk about accountability, it was so different when you have an editor and
Hmm.
you have to run it by people. Now we're also in the age, Jemele, of Substack and independent creators and journalists as well, of course, but independent people in media who don't necessarily have the fact checking, who don't have the oversight. Is I know that media is evolving, for better or worse, but is this sustainable for everyone to just be like an independent creator slash writer?
Well, it's kind of a twofold answer. It's sustainable, but that doesn't mean that's necessarily good,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm,
Is that I one thing I do actually think is a good thing for younger journalists, and is that they don't have to go through nearly as much gatekeeping as my generation of journalists did. I just recently spoke with a journalism class, and I told them this is that, hey, we had to go through a certain procedure to get to the point of where we could have access to a platform to show we could be journalists. You guys could just create your own YouTube channel, or you can just go on TikTok, or you can just go on social media and point out things, observe things, or even do your own reporting and say, hey, what about this? Like they don't need the same gatekeeping system, which I don't think is all bad because I
mm-hmm,
think in that manner you are able to get a very diverse field of people who are interested in journalism. But when it comes to traditional journalists and traditional journalism, it's getting, depending on the level we're talking about, but certainly at the national level, it's getting more and more kind of elitist, just in the sense of a lot of outlets don't say pay you for internship, so that means that you got to be the kind of person who can afford to spend 3 months in New York interning at a magazine without making any money, and
mm-hmm,
we know who that's going to leave out. Okay, so or other media opportunities, like they make you go through a certain amount of unpaid labor just in general, or very low or very cheap labor, and again, we know who can afford to be in those positions. And that doesn't lead to very much diversity, as opposed to if you have a more open system where people can figure out how to contribute, how to have a voice, how to participate in journalism, then it makes it much more diverse. Now, the downside to your point about accountability, it used to be considered a cardinal sin to get someone's name wrong, because then when I first started writing, I wrote for newspapers. So you had to write a correction if you got a fact wrong, a name wrong.
mm-hmm.
And it was a big deal. And that was something that went in your file. Where that file went, who created it, I have no idea. We just know it went in a file. And that was the thing. But journalists were embarrassed by this. And now, because there's no shame in being wrong, there's no shame in misinformation, spreading misinformation or disinformation, that is giving everybody the false idea that everybody can be a journalist. It's like, nah, because if there's you got to be accountable to something. And there has got to be a level of information vetting and a level of truth and credibility there for you to traffic in the field of actually being a journalist. And it's like a lot of those components are missing. Some of it is just frankly money. A lot of media outlets, and particular newspapers, they got rid of like copy editors and things that would have prevented some of these mistakes happening. And so it's just been tough because this is a bad time, I think, for journalists, mostly because I think our profession is doing a very a historically disgraceful job in this moment
Yes.
of everything we're going through as a country. And so it's really heartbreaking to know a profession I dedicated my life to, that we would look the way that we look right now, which is, I mean, silly is not even the word for it.
Amen to that. You mentioned diversity, and there was one quote that you gave in your NPR interview, which was fantastic, by the way. You said in your words that the producers, when you were doing SC6, this is with Michael Smith, quote, would just be kind of frustrated with us because they didn't get all the references. Now, this reminded me of when Denzel Washington once said, when discussing August Wilson's Fences, that it's not color, it's culture. Something that stands out to me is the references were hilarious and they felt funny. Like they just felt inclusive. They felt like, oh yeah, they're talking about Friday. I love Friday. Like I didn't think that much of it. So how difficult was it for you guys to navigate the space knowing this quote that you gave when you were looking back?
You know, the great thing about Mike and I is that even though we were, different personalities and different in what we brought to the table, and brought in terms of the show, we were very like-minded in lockstep about the core things. And one of the things that we decided early on is they will learn to like it. Mike used to say that all the time. And what he meant by that is we're not going to stop being us to please somebody else. Because to me, that is the fastest way that you wind up not being good on television, is that when you become somebody else's version of who they think you're supposed to be.
Mm.
And we always had the attitude of, hey, we could take this TV shit or not. We could leave it. We could leave it right here. And but if we're gonna do this, we're gonna do it our way. And if we succeed, great. If we fail, yeah, we'll be sad about it, but at least we know that we did it in a way that was authentic and true to who we are. And we could live with whatever the fallout was from that. So if we do a bunch of Friday references and Love Jones references and whatever other cultural movies, and nobody gets it and our ratings go massively in the toilet, we will take that L, but at least we like, hey, we did it. We did it the way we wanted to do it. So, but what we could not stomach is somebody else telling us like, hey, you should be more like this and that'll make you successful, us following it. And even if we became wildly successful doing that, we wouldn't have felt good about it because it wouldn't have been us. So yeah, we both had situations where there was a lack of cultural competency. And, certainly I think we felt like at times we were victims of some double standards because, an example I used to give all the time was, Scott Van Pelt, one of the most talented people to ever come through ESPN. He got, he understood Black culture in a very in a very good way. And he infused Black culture in the show. And Scott wasn't friends. That was part of honestly who Scott was and his experience. And he would tell us about college and Maryland and how he used to hang with the brothers. Like, you know what I'm saying? So this wasn't Scott trying to be somebody he wasn't. Scott knew how to play spades. So we did a whole thing where we all play spades. And it was hilarious because Scott won. him, him and Ryan Clark, man, they beat us. I was like, man, I ain't gonna be able to go to back to Detroit, because this white man done beat me in spades. And so, but Scott loved hip hop and he made hip hop references. I mean, there's a Black choir that does his intro,
Right.
okay, right? And I think these are all great things, but there was no question Scott doing those things, it made people look at Scott as cool. Like, oh, Scott is super cool. Like, that's so great, whatever. I can't speak to what the internal temperature was in the building, but I certainly, and I'm sure, everybody at ESPN goes through something. And there may have been people inside the building who were like, yo, Scott, we don't like this. But as far as I knew, it was generally fairly accepted. And when he designed his sports center, he was able to get this Black choir that did that. His show had some flavor to it, which is what made it good, and that was fine, and nobody tripped. Meanwhile, and by nobody, I don't just mean internally, but just even how Scott was seen by the media and people who cover sports media. Nobody tripped. This is Scott Van Pelt. Everybody knows this. Meanwhile, when it's us, then it's something different, right? So when me and Mike are making these references, when we're having on, guests like Ghostface Killer or whatever, and we're like
Mm-hmm.
in our bag of cultural things that we like, then it's, oh, the Black Sports Center. Then it's not seen the same, that like we're doing something wrong by being connected and showing our connection to culture, which is, as for us, was just as natural as breathing. And that part of it was like, oh, that's an interesting, double standard. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
Black people talking about Black shit and showing our love and affection for Black culture is considered too ghetto, but like Scott can do it, and then but he's hip.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, interesting. Um, so yeah, like that, that was just something early on that I recognized, like that sometimes it can be two sets of rules depending on who you are, what your leverage is, what your contract says, a lot of things.
Definitely. Going further, you told the Awful Announcing podcast, and this is a quote: "We knew when Norby, as in Williamson, the former executive editor and head of event and studio production, took over our show, he didn't really want us to be the anchors. He never would have chosen us to host the 6 o'clock show. But I do think us not being his first choice, or not being a choice, I should say, I think that hurt. And I don't think, while there was certainly a level of professional respect, the narratives around our show, he didn't help to kill those. And I don't know how much he had to do with creating them, but I could say I certainly had my suspicions, especially when it came to certain narratives, that our show was too political," which is very interesting, by the way, to look back on as we're watching ESPN and some of the main people there now. However, he never would have chosen us to host the 6 o'clock show, but I do think us not being his first choice, or not being a choice, I think that hurt. Why?
It hurt because the best example I can compare it to, it's like if you are a starting quarterback and the coach that brought you in gets fired and they bring in a new coach who has a completely different offense that really doesn't play to your skill set,
You're talking about the
or
Bears, by the way, just so you know.
or frankly, because they didn't draft you,
Right.
they have no allegiance to you whatsoever and don't really care about developing you because you're not their pick, you're not their guy. So when there was a change in leadership and the person that brought us in was no longer in charge of our show, and especially understanding that it seemed to be Norby's general television philosophy was a little more conservative than ours. And I knew from the beginning we were going to have a problem. And as much as we had many closed door meetings with Norby, and really, he tried to reassure us that that wasn't the case and that he thought we were both very talented. And I don't deny that on some level. Yes, I'm sure he did think that we were talented, but he didn't think we were a fit for SportsCenter. And I think that was pretty clear. Uh, and he had a different vision for what he wants SportsCenter to be that did not match ours. And so we're already on a different page creatively and what we think the show should be and how it should be presented. And it seemed like because of the poor narratives that surrounded our show, the too political, the too Black, and those are really linked together because what was political about us? I mean, there was nothing. Like
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like you turned into the 6 o'clock Sports Center and we were discussing immigration reform. Like that
Right.
that didn't happen. Like we weren't discussing healthcare. We weren't like Obamacare or not. Like that was never that was never anything that we presented. Now, if there was some political or social issue, it was definitely tied to sports and it was definitely in the news. So it wasn't like we were bringing these topics out of left field. But when you go back and look at some of the things that were said about our show and written about our show, that politics stuff came up and it was just kind of ridiculous. And this is something that I think a lot of Black people know is that your presence is just political, whether you want it to be or not. So really what they were trying to say is where they get these two black people from and why are they on my 6 o'clock Sports Center? That
Mm.
was that was the tone of it. And Norby, I think he was aware of how the show was perceived, wrongly perceived, I might add. And sooner, uh, not too long into his time there, he he did a lot to de-blackify the show. Okay. And that even included the fact that like when we used to open the show, it would be Mike and I welcoming people into the 6 o'clock Sports Center. We're both on camera together. This is how we always did things because we wanted people to know, hey, we're welcoming you in. You're coming to visit our house. Come grab a plate, be merry. This is our house. And Norby got in there and he changed it. He changed the total opening completely to where not only did he get rid of our music, which was done by DJ Jazzy Jeff,
Oh man.
he also, right, which ain't easy to get Jazzy Jeff to do
Legend.
anything
Legend.
for you.
I
Legend
interviewed him.
in
He's
everybody.
amazing.
He's incredible, right?
Yes.
Not easy to get him to do things for you. And he did it for us because he rocked with us. Got rid of that. And then they use what we call a voice from God to do the intro to Sports Center. And he may not have meant it this way. I can't speak to what his intentions were, but let me tell you how it came off. It came off as, especially, let me put this in further context, especially after there was a ratings meeting in which we were told that the number of white viewers were lowering for our show. And even though we maintained a very strong black viewership, they noticed that not as many white people were watching. And then suddenly all these changes come. And so I mean, 2 + 2 = 4 in my mind. It's like, one, I don't know what y'all trying to do. Is like you change the intro, you change the fact that Mike and I are on camera to welcome the show. Instead, you have a voice of God going over what people can expect from the 6 o'clock Sports Center. It's like almost like you wanted us to surprise the white people at 6:05 when they finally put the camera on us to be like, oh my God, you're telling me two black people hosted this show? Well, I don't know about this. It's like, what? So suddenly our personality wall that had Biggie on it, Obama, John Carlos, and Tommy Smith, all that had to come down. So all the things that signal to people that these are two black people who have Sports Center gone. And so it just seemed very intentional and
Mhm.
very purposeful that he wanted our Sports Center, he wanted to make Sports Center great again.
Was oh wow. Was he well put? Was he solely responsible for pulling down the images of Tommy Smith and John Carlos?
Yes, it was his call. And I think a lot of it, frankly, I think the reason why the personality came out was because of one person, and that was Barack Obama. That was why. Because Mike and I had both been invited to the White House, and we had our pictures with Michelle and Barack Obama because we were very proud of them because we couldn't believe the president and the first lady were fans of ours. Like, who gets to say that? You
Hmm.
know, we were proud of those. And I think they probably, because they couldn't single out and just remove his photo, they made us remove everything. So then it seems like it's just a unilateral, just remove all the personality wall and make it plain. But it was really about the Obama photo. I mean, because we're talking about at this point, this is 2017. We know who's president. ESPN is being excoriated for being too liberal, too woke. In fact, they used to call our sports center woke center.
Mm.
Again, why?
Hmm.
Right? What makes it woke? What does that mean? Right? And so because of that, I think they felt like they needed to make it as vanilla as possible. Suddenly they wanted us to add more voices to the show. And, one of the ways I knew that, I mean, again, you could see we could read all the tea leaves. Like the tea leaves are tea leaving. And, it was suggested to us that we should have somebody like Will Kane on the show. Why?
Oh.
Why would you suggest that we have Will Kane on the show? For
Oh.
what? And that's no disrespect to Will Kane but it's like, is he an expert at something that we are not? Because like technically we are all the same thing. It's like, and in fact, we have more expertise than Will Kane because we actually covered sports.
Totally.
Will did not. So we are actually sports journalists. We've actually done this. So why do you want Will Kane to be on the show? I know why you want Will Kane to be on the show because you want to send a bad signal to conservative white people that they're welcome to. So
Mm-hmm.
just say that, right?
Yes, absolutely. So you were not a fan of the model of let's put Will Kane on First Take to talk about why the conservative flag is fine. And currently on Abby Phillips' show, that Scott Jennings has a seat because we need political neutrality. Like, what even is this political neutrality in 2025?
Well, I think, and those shows, when you're talking about opinion shows, I guess it's a little bit different because you are trying to have a wide range of opinions. Like that's generally the purpose of them. So
Fair.
I get that. But what I would say is that this is kind of overall blanket in our profession is that we are we have become intoxicated with neutrality rather than truth because we're trying to both sides everything and everything doesn't need to be both sides. Like we want to die on the sword of neutrality when we should be trying to die on the sword of truth. The truth is there's not two sides to racism. You can't both sides it, right? You can't both sides bigotry, you can't both sides ignoring the Constitution, you can't both sides sending somebody to a El Salvadorian prison. You cannot both sides any of these things, right? Because right is right, wrong is wrong. We know what that means. These are not necessarily issues of politics. This is just issues of like humanity for crying out loud. And because journalists have, there's a difference between being neutral and being fair. And a lot of us got those definitions misconstrued.
Hmm.
You can be fair, you don't have to be neutral.
Right.
Because there's some things, frankly, we should not be neutral about, in this moment, especially since the only way that a free press can thrive is through, or the only way a democracy can thrive is through a free press.
Very much so. Do you, Jemele Hill, still have the Chris Berman voicemail saved? And have you listened to it?
What a question. No one has ever asked me that, and it's rare. It is rare I come across a question I have not been asked. I have not listened to it.
Still?
I have not listened to it ever. And to answer your other question, yes, I still have
How do you
it.
still have
One
it
day.
saved? Haven't you gone through like a cycle of phones? It just carries over?
Now the voicemail, actually. So here's, I guess, a little inside baseball.
Sure.
So when you're at ESPN, he left a voicemail for me at work, not on my personal cell phone. So the way the
Oh.
voicemail system worked then, I can't speak to now, is that you got an email letting you know that you had a voicemail. Okay. And so you're able to actually check your voicemail through your email. And so you're able to save it.
Uh-huh.
So what I did was is that I just was able to save the recording. I just downloaded it and saved it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how. So
What?
that's how.
You know you're gonna have to do it at some point, right?
If it's better that I haven't listened to it or, I don't know, maybe I'll make a big deal out of it where no, I won't do it for like clicks or clout or whatever. Like,
Nah,
but
nah.
it's no reason to listen to it at all. And to be fair, our relationship since then has, we're not friends, so I wouldn't say that, but I think we were able to come to an understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, and mostly it was through an unfortunate tragedy, just in the sense of losing John Saunders, the longtime ESPN host, who was a very dear friend of his and a dear friend of mine as well. And so first time that we spoke post that whole voicemail incident was at John's memorial. And so, when things like that happen, and unfortunately, Chris, he suffered his own tragic loss. His wife
Mm-hmm.
passed away, and I actually had to do the reader on SportsCenter that night. And I remember seeing him in the office maybe a day or so later, and I expressed my condolences. So I don't hold any ill will toward Chris Berman at all. I mean, he's the official ESPN mascot. Like he was there at the beginning, and he's still on air, and so he's earned his place in the history of that company, and was one of the people who definitely helped build it into what it is. And while Um, I wasn't, I was angered by what he did and how he treated me at certain points. Uh, I have enough dignity to and frankly common sense to understand what his place is in ESPN history, and I would never begrudge him that.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
From a Detroit Free Press perspective, and this is also like bucket list stuff for me. So before we came on, I told you that I interviewed Jerobe White from A Tribe Called Quest. Another bucket list one is actually an interview you did, and you
Mm.
discussed it when you told this MC that you had to write a review for Do You Want More? You interviewed Black Thought. You told him about how you were getting your start in the free press. And that was in May of 2019 on your podcast, Jemele Hill's Unbothered. You're a huge Roots fan, which I learned through that interview as well. I am too. Like, not to nerd out here, but like, what was that like? What was that like
Okay,
being like a
so
hardcore and like interviewing him?
so the cool part about that experience is that the Roots, they literally became our friends. And
Oh,
it was kind of crazy how it happened because both me and Michael Smith, we are both big fans of the Roots. And they had several of their band members were big fans of ESPN and SportsCenter. And so the number of times that we have shouted them out on the show or alluded to them or dropped a lyric or something or whatever, numerous times. And I don't know how it initially happened. Either they reached out to us, I don't know if we reached out to them, but they gave us tickets to their show. Like they performed in Boston once and gave us tickets to the show. Us and a couple of our producer friends, like and we, went to the show and whatnot, had a blast because we had it was some other people at ESPN who also were Roots fans. And then right as we were just starting the 6 o'clock Sports Center, Mike and I were coaches on opposing sides at the for the NBA All-Star Celebrity Game.
mm-hmm.
And one of our producers, who is from Philly, also a Roots fan, she set it up that we would go meet the Roots in New Orleans, when we were there for the game. And just throughout the years, like like I've been able to, I have a very good relationship with Questlove. He's a friend. Uh, Good relationship with obviously with Black Thought, and yeah, like so it's funny because like they really went from being people that we loved and respected as musicians to suddenly becoming our friends. And it's like the coolest thing ever. So I'm pretty sure I've seen the Roots more than any other rap group. Like it's nobody is even close to the number of times that I have seen, the Roots. Like, they came out to LA, they invited, my husband and I to their Roots and Friends. And like I mean, I love all of them. Like, truly wonderful people. And that also is the thing that makes you feel good. And I'm sure you had that feeling when you interviewed Jerobe, is that when the people you admire for their craft and their ability, when they turn out to be even better people,
Yes.
it makes it all worth it. It flies in the face of that old adage of never meet your favorites, right? I can say I met my favorite rap group of all time, and they were just as good of people as they were musicians.
Was there one story that stood out in your interview with him?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that stands out about him just in general is like he just possesses like such a quiet genius.
Yes.
And um, he's definitely one of the most underrated MCs ever. And it was kind of funny because we were both lamenting, I think, in that interview about the fact that it might be possible there might be more people that know them from Blues Clues than from their music. Since they were the Blues Clues band, there's a whole generation of like young children who know the Roots as being on, I think it was Blues Clues. So,
Was it Yo Gabba Gabba
but
too?
oh, you know what? It wasn't Blues Clues. You're right. It was Yo Gabba Gabba. Like I was like, I knew there was a cartoon. Sorry, I'm not 3, so I didn't know, but I knew it was a cartoon that and of course, being Jimmy Fallon's, being the band for Jimmy Fallon's show.
Mm-hmm.
And what I just respect about them is that they're an actual band.
Yes.
And I still remember, when I first uh heard, when I was reviewing Do You Want More, like I was blown away, like a Trackian. Like, who is this group?
Mm-hmm.
And they were just so sonically different than anything that was out there. The fact that, again, they were a live band, and just the synergy and the lyrics and just everything about them, it was really something. I would put them in that file that you have of artists you remember the first time you heard them and what it made you feel like. And so the Roots are, um, definitely, just one of my favorite just groups, period, rap or not, of all time.
Yes, 100%. One other thing that stands out about them, well, two things. You were talking about just like great groups. Hip hop is great when you have an actual band accompanying hip hop. It just brings out the best in the
It's
entire
just different.
genre. It
It
is.
does.
It
Yes,
really
it's
is.
very different. Yeah, and it's like, even, when you hear some of your favorite rap artists who are not, they obviously didn't record with a live band, but when you hear them do their music with a live band, it's a
Mm-hmm.
completely different experience.
Yes, it totally hits different. The second is his voice. Not that he ever had like a dog shit voice. Let's be very clear about it. But my God, his voice has just aged so gracefully. Like listening to Do You Want More, and then you listen to Streams of Thought. Like it is the same dude, but his voice has just become bassier, but like it's I don't know how to put it exactly. I can't really find the words, but it's just aged
It
very
hasn't it
gracefully.
hasn't aged a day, that's for sure. In fact, you made me think. I was like, I need to text Quest to be like, so are we getting a Roots album? Like, I'm just curious. Like, can you gonna do one more? Like, where we at with
You want to
that?
text him right now and break that news on
Yeah,
the show?
yes, I was like, hey, yeah, let me text her right now. Like, will we ever get another Roots album?
Hey, I'm
I'm on a
talking.
podcast and I need the answer.
Hey, I'm talking to this guy you've never heard of, and we're trying to bump up his show. But could you break some news for me? That would be super cool. That would be super cool if they put out another album. A name that you touched on was previously. This is way back, and it's a 2-in-1 with Stephen A. And I know you talk about Stephen A. a lot on Levitard, and I don't want to spend a bunch of time on this stuff, but I am curious of your opinion
That's
because
because Lebertard is always asking me about this because he enjoys tormenting me with questions about Stephen A.
I don't
Smith.
want to torment you.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I just want to ask two questions. That's it. And then I will never ever, if we ever talk again, ever bring up his name. So the first is the contract. Him and McAfee
Hmm.
had it. It really did feel like a race to who would be the higher paid employee at ESPN. He got 5 years, 100 million. My entire theory. This interview is not about me, but here's my 2 cents. My entire theory is this, Jamil. It is that I personally feel like ESPN has lost so much in the past few years that they really had no choice but to try and please their cash cow as much as possible. The golden egg, is it golden egg? I think is that the word I'm
Uh,
looking for?
uh,
Star. They're trying
Cash
to keep their
cow.
star like happy,
Okay.
and
Right.
because he's attached to so many different programs, they really were handcuffed. So considering the contract, um, this feels like an unfair question, but do you think he's worth it considering where ESPN is now and he's pretty much the face of the network?
Oh, I think he's actually underpaid. Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I do. Well, you have to. It's what you said. Is like, this is. I mean, he's the face of the network, and this is not something that just started this year. This is something that, like, for several years he has been that. And I think when you look at his trajectory, or not his trajectory, when you look at his entire run at ESPN, is that I don't think that anybody there was banking on him becoming the face of the network. Um, and it happened through his own, hard work, and him being somebody who's able to cut through and registers with people. When I was there, and they commonly did focus groups, and he was always in the top five of being the most recognizable face there. And when you have that kind of cachet and leverage behind you, they got to pay you because, like, they want people to watch. They want people to watch people that make them watch television. That is the entire goal. And like he is a ratings driver. And because he's a ratings driver, he that makes him an extremely successful for the corporate objectives of ESPN and Disney. Because people have to remember is that um, ratings are one thing, but what's even better is when you have advertisers that want to work with you and want to work with ESPN because you're there. And you're an advertiser, you can tell them, hey, notice how many commercials that Stephen A is in. There's a reason
Mm-hmm.
for that. It's because those advertisers want him on their commercial because people react and respond to him. I'm not saying, the response isn't always positive. No, but the fact is that if you in a public that is constantly having their attention, we live in an attention economy. That's what we're in.
Yes.
Attention is a currency now. And so if you're able to create attention the way he's able to create attention and reaction, you are worth over $100 million, like by far.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think. I mean, and you have to compare him to the other personalities that are in his class. Like we're talking about Sean Hannity. We're talking about, um, you know, Laura Ingraham. Like some of the people at Fox. We're talking about Robin Roberts. Like this is a upper echelon class of broadcasters, and this is the kind of money that they're able to command. So yeah, because how much do when you say Good Morning America, you're like Robin Roberts. Like she is infused in the DNA of what that show is. And so if Robin Roberts leaves tomorrow, like there's gonna be a lot of people that don't tune in because how much they love Robin Roberts. And it's the same with Stephen A. Smith. It's like what is First Take without him?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a surprising turn probably at the network because that was Skip Bayless's show. That was his identity. And to have somebody as known as Skip Bayless leave the network and the show does better when he leaves with Stephen A in charge. I mean, gotta pay that man.
Mm-hmm. Quick sidebar.
Gotta pay that man.
Quick sidebar. Did you see his Jubilee?
No, I don't, I'm good.
Okay.
It's like,
Great answer.
I did not see it.
Okay. It was him
I don't.
debating
And
sports.
again, that is nothing. I mean, conceptually, that makes a lot of sense because as someone who did debate TV for quite a while, is that,
Yes.
people often say to you, like, I want to see you debate such and such, and you can't debate me. And it turns into this like weird sort of competition where they want to see you go off, I guess, on a debate tour, just debate people. It's like, for
Mm-hmm.
what? For whose entertainment is that? But no,
Theirs.
I did not. Yeah, for theirs, like really, I'm like, why? It's like it's not like these people are going to be leaving here with changed minds. Like you're not accomplishing anything. You're just screaming at each other. It's like, who cares?
Totally.
You know.
The here's the second question, and then we will never touch on this again. Okay. On Pablo Torre's show, which I'm
Mhm.
sure you know where I'm going with this, for people that don't know,
Okay.
he put out a tweet and then also obviously accompanying it with a segment. I believe it was with Wyatt Cenac
Hmm.
and from the Bulwark. I think his name is Tim Miller, I want to say.
Yes. Oh
Okay.
wait, is that right? But I know who he is from the
Yeah,
Bulwark.
yeah, yeah.
Yes,
The dude
definitely.
from the Bulwark. So
Yeah. Mhm.
here was their tweet. Okay. We commissioned a legit Rasmussen poll of 1,000 plus voters on Stephen A for president. Here are the odds. The percentages, excuse me. Kamala Harris, 45%, Stephen A, 24%. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 32%, Stephen A, 28%. Gavin Newsom, 31%, Stephen A, 28%. J.D. Vance, 38%, Stephen A. Smith, 34%. They then put at the end, our pollster concludes, quote, based on what I saw in these numbers, he should run. This has been, I don't know why this is even a conversation, but it's been a conversation. What do you make of all this Stephen A. Smith for president chatter?
So it's funny because I hate that it's a conversation because it has become such a conversation. Even I am forced to talk about it, not just on this platform, but I'll be talking about it on my YouTube show for sure. Is I guess I just refuse to believe it. I just really do. I mean, I think we have seen polling is not always right. We have
Mm-hmm.
seen this, but I just do not believe because I did see some snippets from his interview on This Week on ABC when he says that like several billionaires and politicians have come to him and said, you should run. I'm skeptical. I'm not calling Stephen A. A liar. I am skeptical, and I would love to know who are these people that are saying, Stephen A. Smith, you should run for president. Well, one, we have to, this is sort of one of the byproducts of the person that we have in office now, is that understandably, it has given people a lot of confidence that they can also run for president. And in an age and a time where the disrespect for actual expertise is at an all-time high, and we're constantly there's an anti-intellectual movement. And I'm not saying that Stephen A is not an intellectual, and nor am I coming after him in terms of his
I know what you're saying.
his ability. So I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying in general the mood in the country is that expertise is bad, to be smart is bad, to have experience in something is bad, that you have people on social media that will sit up there and argue with a renowned scientist about something in their field, and will leave there thinking they're smarter than them. And I'm just like, how did we get here? Okay. And so unfortunately, it's all tied in kind of together, is that, and I guess some of it comes from the fact that people have a deep distrust of government, something they have earned. And now everybody is thinking, well, the new government needs to be the anti-government. It means to be somebody with no political experience whatsoever, that has never run for government office. Like, that person will be true to politics. They will be true to the system. They will stand up for us. People, we have seen too many examples that, politics is actually a skill.
Yeah.
It does require you have some level of expertise in this, especially when we're talking about geopolitical affairs. I try to throw a shot, but you mean it, this is the same dude who, in his field of expertise, referred to Cade Cunningham as Wade Cunningham. But that's who you want to put in charge of massive geopolitical matters. I'm just saying, is that, I'm sure it's very flattering. And, given, to be honest, the money that's in politics, I mean, he probably could, like, let's be real, he probably could make more money
Yep.
doing the political thing than he could when he's at ESPN, which I know sounds probably bizarre when you're on $100 million contract. But when you look at the amount of money, if it is true that these billionaires have approached it, well, if somebody's going to fund this campaign where you could get 200 or 300 million people to pour money into it, like, hey, I can see why somebody might look at politics as a come up. I mean, listen, Vivek Ramaswamy wasn't gonna poll and do nothing, and he ran for president, and you could say it helped him become a household name. Not that Stephen A. Smith needs that, because at this point he's kind of a household name, but look at the amount of attention, and how that carries on, and how you're able to monetize that just by running for president. It's why Jill Stein just rises from the ashes every few years.
Every 4 years.
Every 4
She's
years.
there.
Here she comes. It's like it's something in it for people. But I just think this idea that this is an idea that we should treat with a level of seriousness. Just again, I think a lot of that, when you look at the coverage that this has generated, and again, I feel terrible because I'm probably part of the problem, and feel free, people, to call me a hypocrite, but that this wound up being kind of legitimized by This Week on ABC is again kind of how we got to where we're in right now.
No question. I want to touch on how, first off, your vulnerability in your memoir and sharing your story is truly something to behold, and I appreciate you sharing the way that you did. One thing that really stands out is how you just don't give a flying four-letter word when people come at you. And that is something from afar that I truly adore, because I am sometimes in my feels. However, let's I'm going to run through this super quickly in case someone has quite literally woken up from a coma and have no idea who you are. In September 2017, that's when you called Donald Trump a white supremacist. And then ESPN put out the statement where they were like, hey, we addressed it with Jemele, blah, blah, blah. And then the freaking press secretary, who is now the governor of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, said your comments were outrageous. She called what you did a fireable offense, which is just like from afar, again, if you're watching this, like, fuck off. Like, who cares? Who absolutely cares? That why are you weighing in on ESPN? But we've seen how this White House certainly, treats these things. Trump tweeted about the ratings because that is quite literally, there's two things he's upset with, maybe three: his hair, his money, and ratings. Those are the three, not his kids. But what I want to touch on is a piece for Slate that Joel D. Anderson wrote, because I found this to be rather interesting. It was an ESPN talent gathering of 2017, and part of the reason for the meeting, he wrote, was, he said it, partially, not fully, was your tweets. And then a new social media policy was released, and he wrote, and I quote, it all had the feel of a slickly produced high school pep rally. That new policy mandated that we avoid outright partisanship and seek permission before commenting on political or social issues on the air or on social media. What was that experience like for you?
Well, I will say there's a slight amendment to that in the sense of that town hall meeting was actually planned before I did,
Oh,
before I called Donald Trump what I did on Twitter because I
oh.
was supposed to be a part of it. That's how I know. Is that they saw that with the tone in the country, it changed, a lot in 2017, and that there were quite a few people who, quite a few members of ESPN's, broadcasting team that really wanted to understand or wanted to say things about what was happening in the country. And it was becoming kind of a real slippery slope. Add on top of that, the fact that at that point, ESPN being perceived as this liberal company that is politically biased and, anti-right wing. And, they made it seem like ESPN was the kid at school with like purple hair and skate culture. Like ESPN's literally never been that. And so there was a lot of conversation about whether or not ESPN's social media guidelines were reflective of the times, or should they more reflect the times, or like what was the parameters and what could people say, what could they not say, and like just trying to get a handle on it because even though mine was the most publicized incident, they had certainly had other incidents where you had ESPN talent stepping into political waters and it becoming a big story. I mean, like Kurt Schilling, that happened with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's said a lot of things about politics, and there was a lot of blowback from some of the things that he said. And so it wasn't purely directed about me, but it became about me because then I had the most public incident. So I was actually supposed to be at that meeting and wasn't because I believe it happened when I was on suspension.
Mm.
Maybe I think that's and even if it hadn't, I don't know if I would have been the person in the room that should have been there. Because obviously I would have had a lot to say about it. But I think that's why it's so interesting to see where ESPN is now in this moment, because a lot of, whether it be understood or not, a lot of the supposed directives and the things that they were saying you couldn't do then have completely gone out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually glad because I do understand that Disney has a bottom line to protect, but also understand that there are, they're not just broadcasters and talent that works at ESPN. These are people who are participants as American citizens. Like they're here too, and there are going to be some days where things are happening in the country, and you don't want to always be tweeting about who's going to win the AFC East,
Right.
And so I think they have come to understand that these political times are a lot different. I also, to be frank, think that it helps that they have the people who tend to speak out politically that I've seen, that there is a combination of right-leaning views and left-leaning views. I mean, I think probably mostly now is right-wing or
Mm-hmm.
right-leaning, I should say. Those, views have been, and Stephen A has kind of represented both. So it's more down the line, and because of that, I think it gives them the permission and the comfort to lean into it a little bit more than they probably ever have.
Mm-hmm. Speaking and sticking with media, look, you've received it from a lot of people. All right. One person that you have received it from was Megyn Kelly and Riley Gaines. That's two people. And on the topic of Caitlin Clark, here's what Megyn Kelly said when she spoke out, rightfully. Megyn Kelly said the players of the NBA can't blanking stand her. Why? Because she's white. It's abject, absolute racism. It's total racism. And one of the things that's been admirable about Caitlin is she just continues to play her game and puts points on the board. Instead, she decides to go racial in what she says as she feels the need to acknowledge her white privilege. Basically, she's sorry she's white. She feels really bad about it, though. And then she makes a point of saying the ones we really need to be celebrating are the black women on whose backs this league was built, which I have to tell you something is so condescending. It really is. And we could go on and on about this. But considering who Megyn Kelly is and her playing up this whole gotta be apologetic for being white thing, like it's such a smorgasbord of bullshit. But what was your reaction to
Okay, so this is the portion of the interview where we talk about miserable people. Got it.
this?
It's on brand for her.
Mm-hmm.
This is Mrs. Santa Claus is just white. That's just how it
Right.
is. I mean, it's like the hills she chooses to die on are just so bizarre to me. It's like the whole, it's like, okay, this is the thing is that when Caitlin Clark could be used as an avatar for whatever people politically wanted her to stand for, based off nothing she said, based off certainly not based off how she played. I mean, how she played is fantastic. When they thought she was an avatar that stood for certain things, and when they thought that she was their perfect weapon to use to bludgeon black women, they were all about Caitlin Clark.
Yep.
The moment she showed a level of respect, a level of, affinity with the same people that they wanted to use her as a blunt instrument again, then suddenly she can't think for herself, which is what Megyn Kelly alluded to in her comments, that she was somehow forced to make these comments, which she made, as part of a piece on her in Time magazine, because I think she was Time Athlete of the Year.
Correct.
And because Megyn Kelly, I'm guessing, has probably never been to a WNBA game, probably has never had a conversation with a WNBA player in her life, and probably does not follow the league at all, other than to pop in and out on these moments where she can use somebody like Caitlin Clark as her own petty avatar, then her ill-informed comments make a lot of sense from that perspective. But I thought what Caitlin Clark said, she wasn't apologizing for being white. What she was saying was something that is not news, is that she knows that as someone who is, and other, by the way, Caitlin Clark ain't the first white player in the WNBA to say this. Kelsey Plum said the same thing. Breanna Stewart has said the same thing, is that they know, just by the virtue of being white women, that they're going to get, advertisers are going to be more prepared to rock with them. Marketers, they're going to be marketed differently. Like, this is a conversation that's been taking place in the WNBA for years,
Mm-hmm.
all right, about how a lot of the black players had to fight for opportunities outside of basketball because simply either the way they look, the fact that they didn't consider them to be the type of women who could appeal to all American women, like they know what they're up against. And the white women in the league who have some level of self-awareness understand this difference. They understand there is a certain amount of privilege they're going to get just from being white. They get it. And that's all she was saying. She wasn't saying like, I'm sorry that I'm white. She was just saying like, I acknowledge I do get some privilege. And I acknowledge that because even though she's one of the best, women's college players in history, her WNBA story obviously is still being written. She's been a transformative player for two sports, women's college basketball and for the WNBA. She understands her place in history, but also understands that the whole reason she's sitting there is because there were a lot of black women that came before her that made that possible, that fought the fight she didn't have to fight so she could be there. And I think that's just being emotionally intelligent to recognize that. Just like I easily recognize that Pam Oliver, that Jane Kennedy, that other Leslie Visser, that other women in sports have, Lisa Olson, have gone through things in locker rooms that I didn't have to go through because they went through them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. All right. And so I think it's just Megyn Kelly, unfortunately, further being herself.
Yes. What really gets me is the lack of self-respect. That's what really gets me. Because during those debates, when Donald Trump ran the first time, what he said about her, and then for her to completely just throw all of it away and go, I don't even know what is stronger than a big endorsement. She went above and beyond, considering the way that he treated her. And all that tells me is, like, yeah, it's politics, but also it's gross. It's gross that this person doesn't have respect for herself, that he would say that on national television about her.
But here's the thing is that for, and I have discovered this in my time as media, is being a member of the media, is that a lot of people in the profession are playing a part. And what really sunk, this really sunk in for me when I think the first time I went to the White House when Obama was in there. And this would have been, I think, 2016. And in the receiving line, a lot of those same Fox News personalities that were ripping Obama from end to end, including Megyn Kelly, I'm pretty sure, I'm positive she was there. They were all in the receiving line to get a picture with Obama.
Mm.
And that let me know, oh, this is just theater to them. They just playing a part. I mean, it's just theater. Like, and so that just, I never had a lot of respect, but like that's when I knew. I was like, oh, this is really just a game and a grift to them. It's like they're
Mm-hmm.
willing to do whatever because they're playing a role. It's not even authentic. And so it's easy to switch up like that. Like it's easy to, after hearing somebody in Donald Trump's position who completely, dehumanized you in front of a very large audience, it's easy for you to go run it back because you never believed anything you said to begin with. You have
Mm-hmm.
no conviction. That's why it's so fake. And so it's like it's pro wrestling for them, And that's why I have very little respect for people who do that. Very
Understood.
little. Actually, I don't have any. So I'm like, I don't even know why I'm trying to say it's little.
Okay, so zero. There's another person who probably is in the same category that I mentioned previously, and you had a back and forth on Twitter, surprise, with Riley
Hmm.
Gaines when
Correct.
she tweeted, "No one was asking for Caitlin Clark to position herself as a right-wing hero. All she needed to do was remain neutral." I mean, she pretty much told on herself there. "She's a phenom who
Right.
inspires countless young girls to play and achieve, so I still have great admiration for her, but she missed the mark on this one." And in a follow-up, she would call you, a shocker, a race baiter. So you responded, "You holler all the time about supporting and protecting women, and yet the moment that Caitlin Clark expresses appreciation, and respect for the black women in the WNBA, many of whom she grew up watching and idolizing, suddenly you're acting like a disappointed parent," which was obviously A plus. But as I alluded to previously, she sort of gave it away when she said all she needed to do was remain neutral, correct?
Yes, correct. Because all what she really wanted to say is all you had to do is not show any level of respect for these black girls, and you would have been our hero still. But because you dared to show some respect to marginalized women, now suddenly it's the wrong move. Look, all I know is this: Riley Gaines better think she need to send Leah Thomas a cut of her money every month,
Oh, yes.
every single month, because I've never seen somebody who was as who you know
Unsuccessful?
I was trying to think of a polite word to put it in
Isn't
her
that
own
polite?
scorn.
Was I not being
I mean,
polite?
I was trying to think of a polite word to say there because I don't want to denigrate the fact like she became a college swimmer. A lot of
Hmm.
people never get that far,
Hmm.
but I've never seen somebody able to curry so much favor, gain so much capital and currency out of being fifth place.
Hmm.
Never seen it before in my life. And the reason she has been able to do that is because she willingly stomped on a marginalized community and trafficked in their disrespect and denigration as human beings to get a to get the attention in the attention economy. She did it and continues to do it. It's her only claim to fame. Her only claim to fame is I finished fifth place. That's her claim to fame. And, to now be this like media star, and you're a star because of how you denigrated somebody else. Like that's how you got there. And rather than be thankful for such a good fortune on such very little accomplishments, she just continues to be a part of this media pro wrestling ring and play this part. And I was like, because I just doubt very seriously. Like and listen, let me just say this. I do understand that there are real concerns from women who compete in sports about what the presence of trans women means in their sport. Everybody's trying to figure it out. There's a lot to the science that we still don't know, that has never been proven or disproven, that scientifically we don't understand some things. But I do know that the way to go about it isn't the way that she did it. And because of that, and seeing her always hollering, always talking about support women, support women, support women. Oh, I get it. The asterisk is except if they're black women. You can support all other women, just not those women. Got it.
If she hypothetically invited you on her show, would you accept?
To quote Eddie Murphy in Boomerang, and hopefully you get this reference, not even if Jesus was pouring.
Understood.
Because I don't do that. Like that's not,
I feel you.
and I am not criticizing anybody who does because we see this happen a lot of times where you have opposing views come together and
Right.
duke it out or whatever. But even if we have, I don't. It's not that I mind somebody having opposing views. I mean, that's part of what you sign up for when you do this job. Is like you're going to constantly be confronted with opposing views. It's like when I know that there is just a disingenuous grift behind it, I,
Mm-hmm.
I can't belittle myself to do it.
Right.
I can't.
Right.
So,
Makes sense. Here's the last shitty person, and then we will never discuss these people again. Okay. I'm. Look, he's called me out a few times, and I continue to call his ass out, and I'm happy to do it. But you told Levitard show that when Jason Whitlock was hired, you didn't want to work with him. Why?
mhm. A lot of it has to do with things he's, said about me, things he said about people I respect in the business who are my friends. Um, just I didn't. And this is very true, is that I I wanted him to be successful at ESPN just because I know what that would have meant to Black journalists in the broader landscape. Because you know he's he was put in charge of being the architect of something that ESPN had never tried before. And so it would have been stupid for me to root for that to fail, especially when it could change the lives and careers and amplify the lives and careers of so many Black journalists and editors and thinkers. That was really important to me. I just didn't want to be a part of it because, um, I felt like it would have been disingenuous. Like, okay, I can root from you from afar. Everybody ain't gotta root up close. Okay. And I just I just didn't feel comfortable with given what had been the history between us. I didn't feel comfortable doing that. But when I told him I wasn't gonna, work with him, I did say to him that I hope you are successful, and I really meant that. But I felt like his mission was just too important not to succeed. And unfortunately, it was one of those times where I certainly wasn't surprised by the ending. And yes, I was, sort of right to secretly thinking like, as much as I may want this to work, ultimately this person has a very proven track record that shows that this is probably not going to work. It was one of those cases where it didn't feel good to be right. And so I often said the same thing about what I said about Donald Trump is that I wish I were wrong. I wish it was true that he wasn't the person that I said he was. I would have been as off the mark about anything I've ever said, but that wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, because of that, a lot of people's careers suffered for that.
In the Deadspin piece, when they had a really long write up, I believe one part of it said that he passed out notes that contained quotes by him. Is that true?
I think it was something about that. I don't know if that's true. I knew some people who were working with the Undefeated at the time, and I don't think we ever talked about it, so that's not something I could personally verify.
Okay.
Not surprised if it was the truth, but because there was a lot of very interesting stories that were circulating in the building during that time.
Yeah, I could only imagine. One person that you did interview, and it's really awesome to look back on this, was for Anscape. You interviewed Kobe Bryant in February 2018. And he said, you asked, when you look across the landscape of the black athletes today, whose leadership impresses you the most? Here was his answer. I think what Colin Kaepernick stood for is the epitome of doing what he believes is right. Now, things have been taken out of context and misconstrued, and they tried to blend it this way and that way and missing the point of what it is, the message that he was getting across. And I think having the bravery to be able to do that is something we should all stand for. It's very hard as a black athlete to just simply sit here and say, you know what, we're comfortable, we made it. We have it made, it's okay. We don't need to jump into this thing. It's too much controversy, we don't need it. Is that the right thing to do? No, it's not. I think when Colin initiated what he did, it brought a sense of urgency, a call to action, and immediacy that wasn't there before. It brought it to a national level, something that cannot be ignored anymore. And I think it gave a sense of urgency, and we need to do something, and we need to do something now. As you hear this quote once more, and you reflect, first off, how was the interview, and what goes through your mind?
The interview was phenomenal, and Kobe and I, we probably developed a relationship. I think I want to say maybe 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. And I interviewed him in like among a scrum of reporters before then. Uh, I believe at the Western Conference Finals. That might have been the last time before I had some interviews with him when I was at ESPN. But at any rate, he was somebody who really had a strong sense of who he was and what he stood for, and yet had the remarkable ability to keep his mind open, like rooted in principles and values that matter. Also, somebody who was willing to listen, and also somebody who was willing to consider different viewpoints. And I have no doubt that when Colin decided to take his knee, I think Kobe would have absolutely done something um, to support his demonstration for sure. That interview, I remember. So when Kobe and I, the first time we did like a long sit down interview was during BT uh, Awards weekend, and the weekend other than the award show is like a big. They've turned it into kind of like a development weekend and a like a 3-day thing. So they have different exhibits, a sneaker exhibit. They have different panels with actors, entertainers, musicians, that kind of thing. And so they had this series called Genius Talks where they would have someone like myself, journalist, newsmaker of some kind, sit down with somebody who also was a big newsmaker and just learn about who they were, how they got to be so successful, and just it was supposed to be like kind of an intimate conversation. And Kobe and I did one of these for BT. And I remember when we were, kind of headed to the main stage where we were supposed to be. And I said to him that I joked with him. I said, I think you're probably going to be one of those guys that's going to be really unhappy in retirement because you're not going to be able to find something that's going to excite you as much as basketball does. And he was like, nah, I won't be that way at all. He said, I know what I want to do. And I was like, what do you want to do? And he told me that he wanted to tell stories. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I really am into animation. Like,
Mm.
I really, and then he started asking me these different movies. He was like, you seen Finding Nemo? I was like, no. And he was so disgusted with me that I'd never seen Finding Nemo, or was it Inside Out? It was something else, and that I had never seen. And he was just utterly disgusted with me at this moment, right? And so I was like, not a big animation
Mm.
thing. I'm thinking that mostly for kids. And he's like, no, the storytelling in animation is just like really remarkable. You can tell like he really had a passion for it, but nevertheless, I'm thinking like this is one of the most hyper competitive athletes we've ever seen across any sport. There is no way this man's gonna leave the game and just be okay with just kind of living a regular civilian life. And that was not the case at all. So when I went years later to interview him as part of Landscape and for ESPN, he had this whole workspace, this whole floor of this office where he had animators and creators, and like he was really into creating things and especially animation. And as we all saw later, sure enough, he won an Oscar
Yep.
for that very thing, for telling a story
Dear
about his
basketball,
love
right?
of for Dear Basketball, for his love affair with basketball, which was I don't know if animated is the right word, but it was an incredible piece of art, basically. And I was like, that's what I get for doubting Kobe. Like, not only was he happy, only him could leave basketball, and within a couple years, he would win an Oscar. I mean, I think I think a lot of people have speculated this, and I think it's definitely fair. It's a fair speculation. It feels like he was on his way to becoming a women's basketball coach. Like he was already
Mm.
coaching his daughter, and but I could have easily seen a trajectory where he winds up being a WNBA coach. Like that would have been really special to see. Like if that, because he went to more women's games than he did NBA games. So
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to see Kobe in that space, especially given where like the league is now. Like, oh my God, like for him to be a part of all of this would have been really special.
Yeah, amen to that. There's a few more that I have for you. And just going further on the Colin Kaepernick angle. When the Jay-Z NFL partnership formed in August of 2019, how did it make you feel?
Disappointed. Uh Disappointed because I thought the partnership was a strange one. And I mean, I get the point of the partnership. The point of the partnership, though, I don't think that's how they framed it in that moment. The point of the partnership was somehow to create a some kind of synergy between entertainment and social justice in a way that the NFL would be able to contribute on a large scale to social justice causes and really set themselves up as being some kind of change leader. The problem with that is that none of that included Colin Kaepernick, which is the person who got you to even thinking about any kind of social justice. The other component of it is that I just really didn't see how those things were even remotely connected. And it just seemed very much, and the NFL did kind of lay this out, because when you read the transcripts of the conversations that took place between the owners and the players as they were trying to negotiate their way out of, can we get them to stop kneeling? I believe it was the Buffalo Bills owner, Terry Pagula, who said that they needed a figurehead, a black figurehead, that would help them in terms of polishing their image and also connecting them with the black community. So they were looking for somebody like Jay-Z that
Mm-hmm.
would tell all the other black people, hey, this is okay now. We can mess with the NFL again. I'm here. I'll make sure that everything is smooth and that, we're respected and all that sort of things. They were literally looking for that. They said it in that meeting. That's what they wanted, and that's what they got. And I thought he let him off the hook. Plain and simple. That Super Bowl halftime show was on life support. Like nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to touch it. It was irrelevant. It was not considered cool. And they were having some problems. And he fixed that for them and gave them access again to the biggest Black entertainers in the world, the biggest entertainers, period, in the world who, happen to be Black. And when we look back in retrospect about what that deal was and what it accomplished is making sure the artists that were connected to him were able to get a incredible platform, hundreds of millions of people, and you know streams, and like all for all the financial reasons that you want an artist to do the Super Bowl halftime show. That was very much accomplished. But the social justice part, no, that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. And the thing is that the NFL got what they wanted on both ends. They
Yep.
got access to Black entertainment. They got guilt-free access to Black entertainment. Let me be clear about that. And they also got the players to stop kneeling. So they got what they wanted.
I would also say that Jay-Z won as well. The NFL owners
Oh
won.
yeah, he won. He
Jay-Z,
definitely won. I mean,
massive win for him, of
yeah,
course.
it was a very massive personal win for him. But again,
Yep.
not how they sold it when they got the partnership. That's not how he sold it. He made it seem like this was going to be something that everybody, the community itself, and I thought he wasted his cultural capital on a entity that did not deserve it.
So, in what really just struck me were two moments. There were many, don't get me wrong, but there were two moments in that meeting with Roger Goodell, Jay Z, handful of media, and Rock Nation people who work for Jay Z. And it was the quote, "We moved past kneeling." That was bad. That was really, really bad. And the second part was, "This isn't about Colin getting a job." As you
Yeah.
said, you can't even be at that table without mentioning Colin Kaepernick's name. So it really just felt like a divide between, well, because of the groundwork that he laid, and let's be very clear, the career that, although it should not be this way, he gave up. That's the reason that you were in that chair. And then what also kind of, it kind of bugged me because I didn't just buy it being objective and I guess skeptical, was when Stephen A. Smith went on All the Smoke and he said behind the scenes Jay-Z is fighting for Colin Kaepernick. But nothing happened. And I
But it's
just,
like, but how would he, and I'm not calling Stephen A. a liar, and certainly not saying that Jay-Z hasn't mentioned it or whatever. Like, I don't know what he's done, but how would he do that from the position that he's in? I mean, anybody who knows how the NFL works knows either that's not true, or that if it is, then somebody's doing some really heavy gaslighting, because the owners, it's like they're their own individual countries. They don't listen to Jay-Z. They have no reason to listen to Jay-Z. I mean, he may have some personal relationships with them, but like he's not gonna be able to tell Jerry Jones or any NFL owner, hey, I need you to give Colin Kaepernick a try. So after they stop laughing, okay, because why would they do that? There's no, the NFL doesn't even operate that way.
mm-hmm,
And so that's why I said I think it was, if he was trying to use Colin's name as to say like, hey, I am doing this behind the scenes, but you have no power to do it. You're not an owner. You don't own anything in this league. You have no, you're doing listen, you are the one, and this is again, like this is not to, I know that Jay-Z has done a lot of things in the community. And um but you can't you were the one that said that they needed you and you didn't need them. That was your line. Super Bowl,
mm-hmm.
I don't need them, they need me. That's what you said. Okay. So under that same thing is that they have you doing the thing that you said that you didn't need. So who really has the leverage there is them. They already got what they wanted. They wanted you to fix the halftime. You did that.
He did.
They have no incentive to give you anything else besides what is related to that halftime show. So I don't even know how that works.
Yes.
So it was just very bizarre that frankly both I mean, I can't really say Jay-Z because he didn't really speak about this publicly. That was Stephen A. sort of speaking for him. But this idea that behind the scenes, these two are so powerful within the circles of the NFL, which we know what that power structure looked like, that they can convince an NFL owner to give Colin Kaepernick a shot? I don't think so.
Right. Agreed. The only time that he would maybe have enough sway was when the rumors came about that he was in the running to own the Denver Broncos. Because then he could have potentially given Colin a job, but who knows? It doesn't even matter
But
anymore.
even in that, okay, we've seen the sales that these franchises have generated, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, but the last one was the Washington Commanders at $6 billion. Unless he was going to be a 51% owner, okay, and I ain't in nobody's pockets, but I don't think he had those deep enough to do that. Um, Unless he was going to be the 51%, then it's like, even with that, that seemed, I think a lot of people said that, and maybe that was his goal at some point, like, hey, I want to own a piece of this. But a lot of people that kept saying that, like, oh no, this is all about an ownership play. It's kind of like, if you understand how the NFL works, you'd
Mm-hmm.
see why that's far-fetched.
Very much so. I
Yeah.
got two more for you. And this was a line that stuck out to me. This was from your ESPN page 2 days. You wrote this in
Hmm.
2005. You wrote in this really nice, let there be light, in this really
Yeah.
nice, acknowledge the
It was
obvious here.
getting a little dark in here.
I
Yeah.
did notice it. I did notice it, but it looks good. I think this was a internal back and forth that you had when you were just starting to get your feet wet at page two. And you wrote, 2005, quote, "I'm not here to be the voice of Black America. I'm here to be a voice." Do you still feel that way?
I do, just because this is not to say that in moments I don't stand up for Black people or Black America, but I also don't want to make the dangerous assumption that we're a monolith, because we're not. I mean, that's very, very much proven we are not a monolith. And I'm not arrogant enough to believe that I should speak for an entire race of people. Can I represent to some degree? Of course. Can I fight for the things that I think are common struggles in Black America? Absolutely. But to position myself in any way to be the leader or the voice of, meaning the definitive only voice, to meaning the defining voice, no, I would never do that, because I think too highly of Black people to consider myself to be just the defining voice of, millions of, like 14% of the population. Like, no, that would be, I think that'd be kind of crazy for me to think of it that way.
Mm-hmm. On your memoir, which, as I told you earlier on in this discussion, that I appreciated your vulnerability. If folks are unaware, just very quickly, your mother Denise had you when you were 18. She used heroin at 11, and at 11, you saw her use it firsthand. You wrote she suffered from PTSD, depression. She was divorced. She was sexually assaulted. The home was foreclosed. You wrote in your journal, as you called it, a release. Why was it a release for you?
Yeah, and just to make sure people have the right picture. My mother, she had me at 18. And so the first time she experimented with drugs was when she was 11, and I was probably like 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see her actually do the drug. She showed me the drug she was going to do, which was at the time crack cocaine. So, um, no, I think writing has always been that for me. It's been a saving grace. It's been a safety net. It's been something that I have thankfully been able to use it as a tool to better my circumstances and get out of some of the trauma that I grew up with. But it started from the place of being a refuge. And it's why my allegiance to it is so, it's it's just so, oh, what is the word I'm looking for? It's everlasting. It is eternal. It is why it is that way, just because writing has given me way more than I could have ever imagined, more than I've given it at times, definitely. And even now, though the subject matter is much different, it still remains that release for me. And also the way to share how the world is seen, or share glimpses and pictures and snapshots of what the world is, even if that world is just college sports or a football team or an athlete. It's a way to do all those things. So yeah, I will forever be in love with writing. It will always be my first love. So as much as the TV stuff was and continues to be fun and it's exciting and obviously pays well, as great as that is, it's like it will always come back to writing for me.
Mm-hmm. You told Levitard as well of your memoir, quote, "You're unlocking and unpacking a lot of doors that maybe you wanted to keep locked." Was there something that you learned about yourself throughout this process that you didn't know before?
Well, sometimes because how often do we really reflect, especially as we're climbing or as we're kind of in the motion and day to day of doing stuff? Like you don't reflect. You know, at least I don't. I can't, let me not speak for everybody else. It's like I don't sit down and think like, boy, I've accomplished a lot. Like I don't really do that
Right.
because I'm so in the moment and so on to the next thing. But the thing about the memoir is that it made me sit down to reflect. In fact, that was the whole point of the memoir is reflecting. And if the once I put everything, in totality, hell, I was even surprised with all the things I went through. I was like, man, I did go through some stuff, huh? Like it was it was a way for me to finally begin to accept compliments because that's always been something that's tough for me. But going through that process of writing the memoir is like, when people come up to me and say that they're proud of me or they're amazed by all the things I went through, I'm going to learn how to say thank you and mean it because I have been through a lot of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's, if anything, I think about it from that standpoint is that it allowed me to actually accept compliments.
My buddy Britton has told me, and it's quoting his barber, Andre, in LA, that we need to have more birthdays, is what I've been told. Okay. So it's also very hard for me to accept compliments.
Mm-hmm.
And I received one last night from my father-in-law, and I don't know why, but my reaction always is to deflect and talk about something else.
Correct.
Why are we like this?
And I don't think everybody's like this,
No,
number
I'm
one.
saying you and me.
But I'm probably because uh I think maybe there's some part of us that struggles with how other people see us. Maybe because we still are so invested and feel like we're so on our journey that it doesn't that when you start to say thank you and these compliments, it feels reserved for somebody who has already gotten to whatever they perceive to be their mountaintop. And I don't, feel that way. And plus it just uh I guess there's just something strange to me about feeling I shouldn't feel this way, but it makes me feel like it's self-important. It's like I don't really need it's nice that people recognize the work that I've done and appreciate it. And if it's inspiring to them, even all the better. But it almost feels like too important of a place to hold that it's hard for me to wrap my head around
Mm-hmm.
to where I'm just naturally like you, I deflect or say like, or minimize or any of those other things. Uh, Maybe because I don't fully understand or appreciate how I got to where I got.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we conclude, I'm sorry to do this, but I have to give you a compliment.
Oh,
I am
no.
very
You
appreciative.
have learned nothing.
It's
You have
very,
learned nothing, Jon Snow.
very clear.
Nothing.
I am very appreciative of your work. I am very appreciative of what you do. I appreciate your approach, your fearlessness, and that you are unapologetically you. So thank you for what you do. Obviously, thank you for the time. It means a lot to me. But I appreciate what you bring to the space and what you have taught us in media. So thank you, Jemele.
Well, I appreciate this conversation. This was extremely thorough. You really did your research, and that to me is a compliment in itself. Is that you were invested enough to ask me these wonderful questions, and so I appreciate you having me on.
My deepest gratitudes to Jemele Hill for giving me some 2 hours of her time. Honestly, in this industry, it is almost unheard of to get that. So I am truly appreciative. If you enjoyed this podcast and interview, please subscribe for free on YouTube. If you want to become a channel member, you are more than welcome. Please throw me a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and leave a review if you can. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.